Good morning. Barry Bryson here. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're continuing our study of the life of Peter. And what we're going to do this time and next is to look at First Peter and Second Peter and just talk about why these letters were written. And we have to remind ourselves that Peter and Paul were both executed in Rome in the aftermath of the burning of Rome, which took place in the summer of AD 64. And then the next year or so, these two men were executed. And so Paul is writing, Peter is writing both First Peter and Second Peter after the burning of Rome. This seems completely certain. He talks about the fiery ordeal in First Peter chapter 4, verse 12, that we are undergoing. And the whole point of First Peter is to prepare the church for the oncoming persecution of Rome. So Peter is coming to the end of his life. He knows he's not going to die a natural death in his bed of old age. He knows that Jesus told him when he told him to follow him the second time that he was going to be arrested and executed for the cause of Christ. And he has made absolute peace with that. We saw that back in Acts chapter 12, whenever he was taken by Herod and was rescued by the angel, that he was able to get a good night's sleep on the eve of his execution. Anyway, so we're at a moment when the Roman government has identified Christians as enemies of the state, and so Peter, before he dies, needs to get the word out, and he's writing First Peter, really clearly to all Christians. And the main topic is, how do you maintain your Christianity, your faith, and how do you thrive in your faith when you live in a world where you are an enemy of the state, where the culture is against you, where you're being persecuted? That's what First Peter is about. And that's why it never um, ceases to be of the moment for any Christian, because we're always living in a hostile culture. And at any given moment, most Christians in the world are living with the threat of persecution, um, not just soft persecution, but hard persecution. He writes First Peter, verse 1, he's to these areas, and he's writing, in other words, to what is modern day Turkey, to the Roman provinces that make up modern day Turkey. Paul, the apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who reside as aliens. That's such an enormously important phrase. Scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia. We know Asia really well. Ephesus and Laodicea, Smyrna, Colossae. We know all those churches. And Bithynia, who are chosen according to the foreknowledge of God. Uh, so, uh, so, um, So he's writing to this large area, but really to all Christians. But the localized persecution by the county mounties, by the local sheriff, that persecution is going to be especially intense in that first century of persecution there in Asia and in the surrounding provinces there in what is modern day Turkey. So that's why he's writing directly, and probably because he spent time there doing missionary work there. This might be a clue as to how he spent his time between Acts chapter 12 and First Peter chapter 1. Okay, so there's that. And in this book was used that way for 300 years, 200 plus years. Say he's writing this in AD 64, and the Edict of Milan happens in AD 313, legalizing Christianity. Between those 2 points on the timeline, Christians turn to First Peter to learn how to live in a hostile world. And new Christians were sent to classes on First Peter to learn how to live in a hostile world. That's why he wrote this letter. And that's how we should read this letter. And what he says is respect everybody. When they interrogate you, First Peter chapter 3, verse 14, you sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, and be ready to give an answer with gentleness and reverence. And also, you don't be afraid. You don't flinch. You fear God, and you honor the king, but you have to be afraid of the king. You fear God. You submit to authority. But you submit to authority because you obey God. You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a people of God's own possession. And you have to live in such a way that when they accuse you of things, you're going to prove blameless. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 8 through 12. That's why he wrote this letter. Before he goes, he needs to prepare them for the first of two seemingly existential threats to the kingdom. Of course, it's God's kingdom, so it's going to last forever. But he's preparing them for their moment of hardship. Okay, next time we're going to look at 2 Peter and talk about why 2 Peter was written on the eve of his own execution. We'll do that next time. Thank you for joining for another 5 good minutes with the Word.